Miriam Meets on RTE Radio1 with Miriam O'Callaghan.
My guests this morning both have cause to celebrate. Paul Brady is celebrating the release of his new album, Dancer in the Fire, a Paul Brady anthology this weekend. His personal selection of favourite recordings that span a career from the 1960s up until today. Andy Irvine is celebrating turning 70 this year with a reunion of old musical friends at a special gig that's June the 16th at Vicar Street here in Dublin. Paul and Andy first met in Dublin on the folk scene in the 1960s and ended up playing together for a couple of years in the 1970s, recording and releasing an iconic album called Andy Irvine, Paul Brady in 1976. Though they've taken different musical paths over the years, they still play together from time to time. You're both very welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Can you remember when you first met?
Well, I think the first time I saw Andy was in a Sweeney's Men performance in a pub called O'Mara's on the Quay. This was the time when every week there would be a new ballad lounge opening in Dublin. It was right in the middle of the huge ballad boom in the mid-60s. And I went down to see Sweeney's Men play one night, and Andy was on stage with Johnny Moynihan and I think it was Terry Woods.
Probably by that time,
yeah. So I immediately loved the music they were playing because a lot of it was kind of sort of influenced by old-time American music, Woody Guthrie, some of the Appalachian Mountain music and stuff like that, which I had always loved. And here were people actually on stage in Dublin playing it and really playing it very well instead of me listening to it on a record. So I was very impressed.
I think it was maybe before that I first saw Paul. I do remember Paul playing, and I'm sure it was Duncan and Brady.
A Lead Belly tune.
Yeah.
I mean.
And I was amazed at this kind of Strabane Delta sound that his voice was producing, you know, and it was. I remember that really well. It impressed me then, and his voice has ever since impressed me as well.
Strabane Delta, that's good.
Yeah. The Deep South.
The Deep North.
So how did you end up playing together the first time? How did that come about?
You know, there was a guy called Galway Joe Dolan, who spent his entire life trying not to be mixed up with somebody else with the same name. He was the original guitarist in Sweeney's Men, and in June 1967, when the war broke out between the Arabs and Israel, he immediately left the band and went to Israel. And I think he was really he got nervous because we had a hit single at that time.
He'd have been successful.
yeah, exactly.
The higher up the charts,
he was afraid of
the more he
fear
wanted to
of
get
success. Yeah. But we asked Paul would he join Sweeney's Men, and we'd missed him by about a week because a week earlier he had joined the Johnstons.
I was in an apartment or a flat up in Rathmines in Palmerston Road, above Mick Maloney and Donald Lunny, who were in this group called the Emmett Folk Group.
What a great flat that must have been, the two of you above each other.
It was amazing. We spent all the time playing poker, all night. My Northern Ireland University grant disappeared in about 2 weeks. Mick was asked to join the Johnstons, who were a big chart-topping success group in Ireland, and eventually he asked me to join. And I joined, and then a week later, Andy Irvine came to me saying, would you join Sweeney's Men? And I kind of went, oh, too late.
Would you have gone for them over the Johnstons, or is that
Well,
impossible?
with the most diplomatic cap on my head, I would have to honestly say that I think the Sweeney's Men music would have been more compatible with me, and I probably would have had more fun in the long run.
But he did play one gig with us, and it was in the what's the name of the hotel down in Limerick?
The Royal George.
The Royal George Hotel in Limerick. And as we all drove back to Dublin, we were thinking, damn, we've missed him.
I don't know.
Because he was good.
Yes,
you felt he was very good.
Yeah.
But in the end, you did end up getting to play together. Was that in Planksty?
Well,
if
the Johnsons kind of came to a sticky, messy end in America in the early 70s, and I found myself stuck out there on my own.
You must have gone to the States to try and break America, and that often breaks a lot of bands if they don't break America.
Exactly. I mean, when we got there, there was the first, what they call, oil crisis. And at that time, record companies needed oil to make vinyl. And record companies were in serious trouble because vinyl became extremely expensive. So record companies were not only not signing new acts, they were dropping half the roster they already had. So it was a very bad time to be trying to break America. But breaking America, the concept of it is just so ludicrous now, I didn't even bear thinking about it, you know.
What's your memory of how you did join Planxty?
I woke up one morning in a place in Queens in New York, and a letter was lying on the ground in front in the letterbox, and I picked it up, and it was from Liam O'Flynn, the piper. And he said, "Look, Christy is just planning to leave the band in a few months, and we would like you to join the band." And at this stage, I immediately wanted to do it because I had been trying to get out of the situation I was in for weeks. But I didn't even have enough money to get an air ticket back. So I had to go working in a guitar school out in Long Island for a couple of weeks to get the airfare home.
But, you know, I mean, it's a fond memory of Paul said, yes, that was a great lift to the band because it was kind of sinking fast at that time. The first meeting I think we had on your return to Ireland was in Buncrana.
Buncrana.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he came
Why
to
Buncrana?
Well, because that's where Planxty was playing, and he came to
Okay.
the gig, and then later in the pub, he took out the guitar and he played Arthur McBride, and we were all blown away, as everybody has been ever since.
Was that the first time you'd heard him?
Yeah.
Or heard that?
It was the first time I'd heard him doing what was his thing at that time, because before that, in the Johnsons, he was.
I mostly sang harmony in
Yeah.
the Johnsons, and I took a sort of a background seat.
He wasn't anyway soloist in the
Yeah.
Johnsons.
But I had some cheek, you know. I mean, coming back, sitting in and then singing Arthur McBride, which was one of your songs. I mean, the nerve I had.
Well, you have a nerve.
He had just recorded it on the recent Planxty album, and I had a totally different version of it, which was a sort of a solo guitar arrangement, and it was my party piece at the time, so I had to sing it.
You had to. I think you apologised to me before you sang it.
Did I?
I'm sure you did.
Oh,
Which version did you prefer, Andy? The one you done or Paul?
Oh, I never compared the two. I mean, I still do. I have a different arrangement of it, but I still do the one that I did with Planxty, and I wouldn't compare the two. You know, it's like they're coming from totally different places. So.
Like us as individuals.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we're very different people.
Did you have good times in Planxty? I mean, you were hugely successful. Were you aware of that at the time?
How successful were we by the time you joined the band? I mean, we weren't quite.
I joined the band, and that was it.
It was really successful from the very beginning. But that success, if you look back at it and you're quite frank, that success didn't really last more than 18 months.
Mm-hmm. Well, what I feel about it is this. I feel that you had your major success in Ireland before I joined the band, undoubtedly. But I feel that the period that I was in the band, about a year and a half, was when the band was consolidated in places like Europe,
absolutely,
Germany,
yeah.
Holland, and England.
Yes, we did. We played a lot more in England and Europe after.
I like to feel it brought a little something to the band.
Oh, well,
and didn't just bury
Paul,
it.
I wouldn't.
Yeah.
Before you get into the two of you together, why did you break up in Planxty? How did that happen?
Well, I think we were just tired of it, you know. I mean, Planxty toured all the time, you know. That white van was always outside the door,
yeah,
and somebody knocking on it saying,
and there was never,
you're out.
Yeah, and there was never any real solid structure there, like managerial, fiscal, budgetary, or anything like that. It was just chaos, and
well, it was like Liam described it as 4 people on a train throwing money out the windows. The train going faster and faster.
Yeah.
Well, was there a moment where, like, Andy, you said to Paul or you said to him, "I'm leaving this," or did you all?
No, I tell you what did happen. Liam called a meeting, and we all knew what it was going to be about.
Yeah.
And we went to the meeting, in Belmont Avenue in Donnybrook, Des Kelly, our manager's office, and there was a bit of kind of humming and harming and laughing, and "Jason, how are you doing, lads?" And eventually the meeting was called to order, and Liam said, "Well," he said, "I'd like to leave the band." And we all, as a man, said, "So would I." So would I. We all left the band together.
I said it first.
There was nobody left in the band. So we went down to Madigan's and we had a few drinks to bury the band. I mean, luckily, we didn't reform it before closing time. We might have done.
I know. But it reminds me of the joke about the folk singer who won the lottery, and he was asked what he was going to do. He said, "Well, I'll keep on gigging till the money's all gone." So
it was definitely a group decision.
Oh, mad.
So
mad
that was
times.
fun.
That was
fun.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun. It was mad fun, but it was great.
But you two obviously did get on well, because then you went and played together for another few years, which is when you did this iconic album.
Yeah, we felt very compatible musically.
Yeah.
And I was always interested in Andy's music. I mean, Andy's music, particularly the music he brought back from Eastern Europe on his travels, I was always very interested in that and wanted to know what that was about, because I'd never played that kind of music before.
You've spoken about those years being kind of glorious years or shiny years. I mean, was it during the time with Andy maybe that you got your own confidence to believe you could be a performer in your own right all by yourself?
Yeah, fundamentally, yeah. I mean, I think that was the period. I mean, the final days in Planksty and the whole period with Andy were when I came out from the shadows, really, and decided I wanted to be a solo performer, you know.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right, because at the end of Planksty, when we formed a duo, it was mainly my songs. You didn't have an awful lot of material.
Yeah.
And gradually, as you got The Lakes of Pontchartrain and Mary and the Soldier and all these things, and we began to kind of equal in terms of material, Paul's confidence rose tremendously.
When I found my voice, and when I stood up and when I started to be able to perform with the guitar and sing songs and see a reaction coming back and people going, yeah, you know, it gave me strength and it gave me belief in myself. And, you know, Jerry Rafferty came along with an album called City to City and the song Baker Street, which is a huge iconic hit ever since. And I suddenly felt, I want to do that. I mean, I don't want to be Jerry Rafferty, but I certainly want to pull off an entire cocoon, whatever it is I'm in, and I want to find if there's somebody else in here. And really, that was the impetus that made me start to write songs in 1979, 1980. And eventually I started to find I could write songs, and I could also express parts of myself that I wanted to express through my own songs. Then I made the decision to break from folk music, because in a way there was no way the two things could be done together. I felt I had to make a complete break and move into a whole different sense of who I was. It was like walking into a different room inside myself that I hadn't realised was there, and suddenly finding all these toys there that I wanted to play with. And I lost interest in the room I'd been in for the previous decade because I was so excited about what I was finding here. And that basically was the shape of my life for the next couple of decades.
But you never had the desire to do what he did, which is strip back whatever you were and do lots of other things.
No, I've been happy, and I still am happy with traditional songs, which have a great emotion in them, and I don't think it can be surpassed. I also write a lot of songs.
I have to say that the shape that you're in is much more multidimensional than almost anybody I know. I mean, you don't need to go anywhere else because there's so much goes on.
It's a large room.
It is a very large room, and there's lots of toys in it.
We're going to take the first piece of music, and the lovely thing is you have brought your instruments and you're going to play this live for me. Tell me about it. It's The Plains of Kildare.
Yes, it's one of the first songs I think that we got together. I'd kind of worked out the basics. I knew what I was doing, and we were rehearsing with Donal. And the two of them were working out what they were going to play on it, and it was wonderful to behold as an observer, the two of them creating this accompaniment. Do you remember that?
I do, yeah. Learning that stuff was magical, you know.
Do you still like playing it?
Personally, I would rather play it more often. I mean, it's such complex music. This, when I look back and hear recordings and see stuff from YouTube of us playing those tunes, like, you know, as young men, we were flying all over the place.
Absolutely,
and
yeah.
it's you have to
Well,
really work hard at it now.
Tell me before you play it why it's complicated.
It's influenced a lot by the music that Andy loved in Bulgaria, Romania, which is like very complex time signatures.
Every note is in its place.
Yeah, or not.
Well, we go listen to it now.
Okay.
The Plains of Kildare. You go over there.
Okay.
Come, all you bold sportsmen, and listen to my story about noble...
That was fantastic. God, that was complicated. You still enjoy playing because I could see you both. You loved it.
Oh, yeah, well, yes.
Do you think you might ever do another album, the two of you?
Well, I'm probably the one who's more likely to push for that. I think it would be a great idea.
I would do it in the morning if I had enough material. If I had a bunch of 5 songs now that I was really... What am I have?
Sam Henry, check out Sam Henry.
Well, I actually have 2 or 3, but yes, if I had enough material, I'd be very happy to do it.
Well, me too, yeah.
Tell me about your own background, Andy, because I hear an English voice. Where were you born?
Well, I was born in London. I didn't stay there too long. I was farmed out to boarding school at the age of 3.5.
3.5?
Yeah, well, so they say. I mean, I have very little memory of it because I think it caused a traumatic beginning to my life because...
I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Why would anyone send their little boy to boarding school at 3.5?
I've wondered about that. Both my parents are quite long dead now, so I have no way of actually finding out. But my mother had been an actress before the war, and that could be one factor, that she was the kind of woman who needed to be the centre of attraction all the time. I mean, she gave up the stage, but she never gave up acting. And that might have been one factor. Another factor might have been that my father loved her very much in a possessive way, and I think that he didn't really care for me very much.
Oh God, that's very sad.
Well, it's not meant to be because it's all a long time ago, and I've long since got over it.
But is it even legal to send 3.5 children?
Well, there was the war, you know.
Yeah.
Did you have brothers and sisters?
I had a half-sister, 10 years older than me, so basically I was only child.
Only child. And how did you land up in Ireland?
I was an actor. I was a child actor, and I when I was about 18, I got a job on the BBC Rep, which was a repertory company they had at the time for radio. There were an awful lot of Irish people in the BBC at the time, and they were the people I gravitated to for some reason. People like Louis McNeice was a good friend of mine, and a lot of Irish actors I knew, and probably because I discovered the demon drink by this time, and I was drinking in the George, the BBC pub, and that was largely populated by Irish people. So I decided to come to Dublin in 1967.
67? Much earlier.
No, 62.
62.
Sorry, 62, yeah.
Well done, Paul.
But I came to Ireland in 62 and went into this pub, O'Donoghue's. And there I was introduced to an entire range of society, which blew me away. And I never looked back. You know, it was the beginning of the real Andy Irvine.
Yeah.
But had you been playing any music before that? I know you were an actor, but...
Yes, I'd been sitting on my bed playing Woody Guthrie, and I did a wonderful copy of Woody Guthrie.
Do you still do that?
No, I don't, but it is his 100th...
I'm sorry you don't. That's one of the things you used to do with Sweeney's Men that I used to love.
Yeah. Your
Talking Blues.
Oh,
you know.
yes.
Great.
But, well, you know, it's the centenary of Woody's birth this year, and I do have a plan to make Woody Guthrie album.
Well,
Which,
you should make it instead of half the message who are making Woody Guthrie records shouldn't be near it.
Absolutely. Well, that's why I want to make it.
You grew up in Strabane, Paul, didn't you?
I grew up on Strabane, but I didn't have any history there in the sense that my mother and father moved to Strabane simply because they were both teachers, primary school teachers, and my father was trained in the south, my mother was trained in the north. They both wanted to work after they were married, so they had to live in a border town. And that's the only reason I grew up in Strabane. It was an accident.
Did you like Strabane?
Well, yes, except that I have to say I didn't really know much of Strabane because I didn't go to school there. I went to school in Sion Mills, which was 3 miles south of the town, in my mother's school. And so basically all my schooling was at a very unusual school in Ireland, which was mixed sex and mixed religion. I always look back on that as a magical thing, that up until the age of 11 I was at school with boys and girls and Catholics and Protestants, and I mean the whole thing that happened afterwards, it was a great experience, and I thoroughly recommend it.
And then you got sent to boarding school as well, did you?
I got sent to boarding school at the age of 11.
Not quite 3.5,
not quite
still.
3.5, but I still thought it was barbaric. I went to St. Colum's in Derry, and there was a thing going round at the time that television had just come in, and television was the Antichrist, and kids had to be protected from it, and send them to boarding school or else they'll spend all their time watching Dixon of Dog Green or something, even though. I sympathise with it in a way. My parents' generation were the first of the sort of Irish nationalist Catholic generation in the north who began to see a way out. So they wanted to make sure their kids were really well educated, and so we were sent to boarding school because they thought we would do better.
And you actually dropped out of UCD. Did they mind?
Oh, they did, yeah. But there was an ambivalence there in the sense that my mother always liked to see me in the media, but you couldn't be in the media unless you were a celebrity, and you couldn't be a celebrity if you were going to be studying all the time. So she had this ambivalence, on the one hand she wanted me to get my degree to fall back on. I hate that phrase. And on the other hand, she was quite happy to see me famous in the Johnstons, So
Andy was talking about his mum and dad there. Did you have a difficult relationship with your mother or not?
Well, my mother and I were very similar, probably, and we had a testy relationship all the time. Yes, we did. I suppose in latter years, I probably felt that my mother might have been trying to live through her children in a way, and I began, as a child, a natural thing might be to resent that, maybe you're only interested in me for how it reflects on you, sort of thing, I don't know if we're getting sort of armchair psychos here, but I felt uncomfortable sometimes with my relationship with my mother, yeah, I did.
Is that why you wrote that song, Mother and Son?
Yeah, it took, my mother's passed on. It took some years after that for me to actually dismantle and decompress and actually feel what I actually felt about her. And I did love her very much, and I'm sure she loved me very much, but we just were very different people.
Before she died, did you feel closer to her or not?
No, we never really, in the final years, she sort of withdrew into herself a bit, and we never really managed to have a closeness that I kind of would have wanted, There. Whereas, my father I got on very well with him because he was easygoing and loved music and drama and, wasn't all that worried about how I turned out, as long as I was happy, kind of way.
So neither of you, in a way, had a very close relationship or very good relationship with your mothers.
I suppose to this day it's a scar with me that I didn't see very much of my mother, because she died when I was 17.
God, you were very young when she died.
Yeah, she's had an influence on me emotionally. It has occurred to me to go to a psychologist or somebody to try and get some memories out, because I don't have any memories till I was about 9. I have very scant memories till I was 9. But I'm not going to do it because it's gone, you know.
No, I know why you were so difficult to work with.
It's all coming out. We're actually, dear listener, we're both lying on couches here.
I let you off the couch now. But in terms of music, do you think music is a good way of almost not reconciling difficulties in your lives, but resolving issues in your own head, even for yourselves?
I do. I absolutely do. I don't think I would have been... I wouldn't have had the creative impetus that I have had if my parents had been different. I think, yeah.
I have to give that to my parents too. I can remember fond memories of in wintertime in the house, sort of sitting around the piano with a raging fire, and my mother and father playing and singing. We would have been maybe 9 or 10 at the time, you know, 8 or 9, and those were very fond memories. And yes, I was interested in music from a very early age, and yes, I think music is a wonderful way of relating to the world, you know. I mean, singing it and listening to it and letting it move through your psyche, and
it's an emotional release too, isn't it?
Yeah, it's wonderful music.
But the next song we're going to take is from your new anthology, which is coming out this weekend, Paul, which is Dancer in the Fire, and it's called Paddy's Green Shamrock Shore. Tell me about this.
That originally was on the album Welcome Here, Kind Stranger, which was my first solo album after Andy and I went our separate ways back in the late 70s. But, of course, we played on each other's records, and Andy came and played on this album with me, and on this song he plays mandolin and harmonica.
So basically the songs you've chosen on that anthology, the songs that mean most to you, maybe?
The anthology to me is a collection of songs that weren't the family favourites. For instance, there's nothing on this anthology that was on my best of that was out a decade ago, 13 years ago. And in a way, I feel that there's a lot of songs on this compilation that maybe fell through the cracks and deserve a second listen, you know.
So we're going to listen now to Paddy's Green Shamrock Shore. That was Paddy's Green Shamrock Shore. Both of you on that, Andy and Paul, from your new anthology, Paul, Dancer in the Fire. Listen, you both live in Dublin now, don't you?
Yes.
Yes.
I also have a house in Fermanagh.
Hideaway.
Yes, which I tend to call my home. But I have a flat in Dublin too. Yeah.
Sure, it's a beautiful county, and not enough people know how beautiful it is.
That's where my mother's from. Yeah.
Fermanagh. Yeah. And you live in Dublin?
I live in Dublin, yeah.
Do you ever go back up north?
I do, yeah. Not as often as perhaps I'd like to.
Having written something like The Island, is it amazing to go back now, though, and see how things have changed?
Things have changed in many ways, yes, but an awful lot hasn't either, and it takes an awful long time for things to fundamentally change, where it's no longer an issue anymore. We're not near at that stage yet, but things have changed, yeah. You
wrote songs, political songs or songs of protest throughout your career.
Yes, I have. Well, you know, I mean, Woody Guthrie was my first influence, and I took on board everything that Woody had to offer, including his political outlook.
Are songs of protest still as relevant today as they might have been in the 1960s?
Well, I'm not sure I like the word songs of protest, the phrase songs of protest. I just feel that there are too many people in this country and the world in general who've got too much money. You know, it's not fair, and it just seems wrong to me that people should be starving and rat poor when other people are stinking rich, you know. It's just there's too big a gap between the rich people and the poor people.
Well, you've always felt like that, and that's always been the case. And I mean, that has informed an awful lot of the music that you've made, and that's why I think what attracted you to Woody Guthrie in the first place. Yeah, but I'm definitely not a political songwriter, and I don't. I mean, the island is, if it's a political song, it's a political song by an accident. It wasn't designed to be that. I've had a difficulty with what you call protest songs, because I've always sort of felt, that there was another side to the story. I've always found myself seeing all sides at all times, and I've never felt like nailing my colours to one particular mast. So although I've ranted and raved a few times in songs, I wouldn't call myself a political songwriter, no.
So would you disagree in a sense over the kind of songs?
A lot of my socially political songs are about, they are in the past, they are about people who I admire greatly. For instance, Mother Jones, who was an American agitator for coal miners, who is having a plaque put up for her in her birthplace in Cork in August. So a lot of my songs are songs about people I who are my heroes.
But in many ways, I like to see you as someone who loves, who's a historian in ways, and who loves history, and who has always been interested in songs that are, if you like, as much historical documents as political documents.
Absolutely, that's actually true. Yeah. I mean, I don't write songs about what's happening in Ireland or the world today. I find that too difficult, because times change, situations change, and your song might become redundant very quickly. And I spend a lot of time writing songs, and I don't want to write songs that are redundant tomorrow.
When you're writing a song, how do you write, Paul?
The honest answer to that is I do not know. To me, it's a magical process. And quite often, a lyrical ingredient that might have sat in a book for a year, and I'll pick up a piece of music that I might have written 5 years before that, and for some magical reason, they'll fit, and I will have the wit at the time to realise that they're fitting, and then take it that step further and finish it. I mean, there's no formula for me, and I hate songs that are obviously written to formula. Always have. So I don't really know how to do it, and I hope I never discover it.
Well, that's interesting. I thought, like, when you first started writing songs, you undertook it as a discipline, didn't you? Yeah,
I mean, I tried to deconstruct songs and figure out what it was that made them successful, and what is attractive about a song and what isn't, and on what levels that attraction works. I have an instinct for what it is, but to describe it would take a long time.
But I agree with you totally about there's no formula. I also agree that it's a fantastic thrill. It's the biggest thrill you can get, I think, is when you suddenly have constructed a verse that is exactly what you wanted to say and said in exactly the way you wanted to say it.
And in the time frame you wanted to say it. You see, the difference about songs and novels is, like, you have like 500 pages to say what you want to say in a novel. In a song, you've got 3 minutes or 3.5 minutes, and it's really, really hard to say what you want to say in that amount of time.
Do you know when you've written a song that's going to be a big, big hit?
Well, I wouldn't be looking at that. I'd be looking only... In fact, in all things, I'm looking for self-satisfaction. Yeah. And, I've been lucky that my self-satisfaction has satisfied other people to some extent as well. So I wouldn't be writing a song to be a hit.
That O'Donoghue's song that you've written, and like songs like The West Coast of Clare, I mean, they're big hits as far as I'm concerned.
Well, yes, but I mean,
they will always be big hits.
Well, I suppose when I'd finished writing O'Donoghue's, I thought, well, this is going to make a bit of a stir in Dublin, at least.
It's a stunning song.
Yeah, it is a stunning song.
But yes, when you've written something that is likely to catch on, don't you? Yeah.
So don't be shy.
No, I'm not.
Sandy.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yes, you get an inkling of the fact that you're excited by the prospect of performing it and people going, oh, that's great.
Do you ever get sick of performing O'Donoghue's?
No, I have that from my mother. I'm a constant performer. I have to be honest.
The positive about your mother we've got.
Yes, there you are.
It's the end of this session.
There's all sorts of positives about it, because, I mean, I would not be where I am today, wherever that is, if it hadn't been for the drive that my mother had, because my father was very laissez-faire, and there's an awful lot of me like that too. And I'd sometimes just as soon sit on a couch and do nothing. But it was her drive that made me go and want to get noticed,
That's really interesting, actually. You're turning 70 this year, aren't you, Andy? Because you're having this big concert in Vicar Street on the 16th of June. What's it like approaching 70? It's only a number. And who's going to be in this concert?
Well, approaching 70 is probably a little bit more traumatic than being 69. You suddenly realise that your days are numbered, and you wonder how many you have left. But I was sitting there with my wife, and I thought, well, let's mark this birthday, and it's not something I would normally have done, but I kind of put the idea out, and it took on. So it's Sweeney's Men. This is my first band. It might be with Terry Woods. Terry, if you're listening, please give us an answer. And then there's Mosaic, the band that the kind of multicultural band that I like very much, with Donal Lunny and Bruce Molsky, Nicola Paroff and Rens van der Zalm. And then there's me and Paul, and we might because there's also Liam and Donal and Paddy Glacken in a band that we're unofficially calling LAPD, because it's so ridiculous for a traditional band.
That's great.
That's quite good. Liam, Andy, Paddy,
and Donal.
Will you both do Arthur McBride?
I mean, we'll toss a coin as to whether we do your version or my version.
I really don't mind.
I don't mind. This is your night, Andy.
Well, I don't really, okay, I suppose it is my night, but I don't really want it to be my night. I want it to be a joy and a pleasure of the music that I've been part of, and I have only been part of it. And we're going to record it, and we might even film it, and I will be remembered. I'm not going under without being remembered.
Does it make you think about your mortality? Are you spiritual? Are you religious?
Am I what?
Spiritual or
no,
religious?
I am not in the least. Neither of them. I put that on the long finger. I consider the fact that we human beings are so humble. We know so little that there isn't any point in considering what or if there is an outcome afterwards. If I was pushed to the pin on my collar, I'd probably say that. Anything is possible. I have no idea. Anything or nothing is possible, and I consider that we do not have the information to continue the conversation any further than that.
Yeah, true.
But look, we're going to go out on another piece of music, which is from your anthology. It's called "You Win Again." Tell me about
it's actually not. I mean, this.
You're going to play this live as well.
I mean, the song is a Hank Williams song, "You Win Again," which I've always loved Hank Williams, and. Andy and I performed this back in 1977 for about one or two gigs in some club in New York State, which we came across a tape of recently. And then I subsequently went and recorded my own version of it, which is what appears on this anthology. But why we sang it here today was to sort of reprise the way we'd done it all those years ago, just as two people. And it was fun then. And it's going to be fun now.
It's going to be great fun.
Well, look, you go both over there now and get ready to do You Win Again. Thank you both very much for being my guest. It's been my absolute pleasure. I hope we do this again in about another 30 years. That'll be fantastic.
Right.
My thanks on sound today to Alex O'Gorman, who's done a brilliant job with the music, to my producer, Eileen Heron. Your concert, Andy, is on the 16th of June in Vicar Street. Bloomsday. Tickets through all the usual outlets. And Paul, your anthology, which is called Dancer in the Fire, a Paul Brady anthology, is released this weekend.
Yeah.
My thanks to everybody today for listening. We'll be here at the same time next Sunday. Until then, goodbye.
All right.
Are you going to play with me?
Yes, I am. But
2 to 3.
Miriam Meets on RTE Radio 1 with Miriam O'Callaghan.